Hello, salam alaikum. Welcome everybody. In today's video, I'm going to answer a big philosophical question. It has been sent to me from a friend of mine, actually, the son of one of my friends who's attending the local school, and kids in his class have been asking this question, and it's the big philosophical paradox, right? And I'm going to address it right now. So let me read the question exactly as I received it, and then I'll give you the complete answer. Okay, let's get to business. He says, the best known version of the omnipotence paradox is the paradox of the stone. Could God create a stone so heavy that even he could not lift it? This is a paradoxical question because if God could create something he couldn't lift, then he would not be omnipotent, all-powerful. Similarly, if God was able to lift the stone, then that would mean he was unable to create something he couldn't lift, again leading to the same result that God would not be all-powerful. And the alternative statements of the paradox include, given the axioms of geometry, if an omnipotent being can create can an omnipotent being create a triangle whose angles don't add up to 180 degrees? Other versions I've heard, can God create a four-sided triangle? And here he says, can God create a prison so secure that he cannot escape it? So let me answer all of this in totally simple but complete terms. There are two things going on here. Firstly, there is the assumption that God's existence depends on God's power versus the fact that God's power is a descriptor. It's an attribute of God, and the primary attribute of God is God's existence. In other words, this doesn't really affect the Muslim belief system either way because our logical basis for believing in God is totally independent of how powerful God is. So that's the first thing. And what we mean by that specifically is we define God as being that whose non-existence is rationally inconceivable. We define God as that whose non-existence is rationally inconceivable, that whose existence is absolute and necessary, that who it's inconceivable that it doesn't exist. That's the Muslim definition of Allah, or part of the definition. So, and that's kind of our logical starting point. So whatever the answer to this question is not going to affect God's existence. But when you start from that frame, it sheds light on the question. Because when you ask the question, is God all power, like, can God do something logically impossible? Before you get to that, you got to say, okay, look, what do we mean when we say God is all powerful? God is omnipotent. God is all powerful. Does it mean, and you got to ask yourself this question, and I would start here. Does God, being all powerful, does God have all of the power that is rationally conceivable? Does God have all of the power that actually exists? Or does God have all of the power that's rationally conceivable, all the power that actually exists, and power that is inconceivable and power that is beyond human ability to comprehend its existence? In other words, is God's power beyond all reason, or is God's power, is it that God has all of the power that is within the bounds of rationality, or does God's power go beyond what's rational? Answer that first. Now, you might say God's power is beyond what's rational, and you might say, no, God has all the power that you can rationally conceive of. Either way, we win. the theist, not the atheist, wins. Why? So let's say, if you're going to go I mean, the whole discussion is happening on the basis of logic. So if you go within the basis of logic that God has all of the power that is logically, rationally conceivable, then when you say, can God create a rock he can't lift? Can God create a four-sided triangle? Can God create a square circle? The answer is no, because that's irrational. That's inconceivable. That power is inconceivable. God has all of the power that actually exists, and all of the power that can be imagined to exist, right? So can you conceive of a four-sided triangle? No, it's a contradiction in terms. So it's beyond reason, it's beyond logic. So if you say, to the answer to the first question, does God have all the power that exists and can be conceived within the laws of logic? If the answer to that is yeah, that's what we're defining as all powerful, then you say, can God create a rock he can't lift? The answer is no, because that's a silly question. Now, it's so funny because people who believe in God, when they hear this question, intuitively, like, that's a silly question, but you can't pinpoint why. And here we're really going to break down why, that It's not that the question doesn't make sense. It's that either way you answer the question, the answer is correct. It just depends on what your definition of all-powerful is. So if all-powerful means all the power that can exist, then that's what God's power means. That's what all-powerful means. Then the answer to this question is no. God can't create. There's no four-sided triangle. It doesn't exist. Everything that does exist, God creates, is within God's power, right? Now, if you were to say, no, God's power is beyond reason. God's power is beyond what we can conceive. God's power is beyond the laws of logic and rationality. Then can God create a rock he can't lift? Yes, and without lowering his power in any way. And we're like, oh, but that's illogical. Yeah, but you just agreed that God's power is beyond logic. So you can't then say, oh, but your answer to this question is illogical, but you've just said God's power is beyond logic. So if God's power is within logic, then the answer is no, because that's an illogical proposition. If God's power is beyond logic, then the answer is yes. How? I don't know, because it's beyond logic, right? It's in some weird eighth dimension that is beyond time, space, and matter, and whatever a human rationality can possibly conceive. And in the same way, God can create a four-sided triangle in some realm beyond what human logic can conceive. So either way, we win, right? Because if God's power is within rationality, the answer is no. Why not? Because it's an irrational proposition. The same way a four-sided triangle is an irrational proposition. Everything. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. If God has all of the power that exists and all of the power that can exist in all the power that can even be rationally conceived, is that not powerful enough for you, my dear atheist friend? Right? Is that not powerful enough? All of the universe, all of the multiverse, all of time, space, and matter, everything that you know, all the power that you have, all the power that everyone in the whole universe has. Is that not enough power? God is beyond all of that and contains all of that within his power. Is that not powerful enough for you to put your forehead on the ground and say, you are the all-powerful? Right? And in the Quran, there's this phrase, huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. He is powerful over all things, right? Which implies powerful beyond everything else. Powerful. In fact, we even say everything that has power only has power by his permission. So really, it's God's power. It's just that he's delegating that power to another person, but it's still within his control totally. So can God create a rock he can't lift? If God's power is within the laws of logic, then no, because it's an illogical proposition, but God still has all the power that does. And here's the thing. God has all the power that exists and that can exist, which is all powerful, right? Or you say God has power, all the power that exists, all the power that can exist, and all the power that can't exist, which is actually inconceivable for a human, because if God has the power to create a four-sided triangle, then that power exists. So then it comes within the realm of logic again. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, another question might be, I started by saying how powerful God is not, it's a secondary question, because our affirmation that God exists comes before addressing how powerful God is. So the natural question here is, well, then how do you know God exists in the first place, that you're answering this question with such certainty? So if you want to know how do we know God exists, I think that's going to be the topic of another video, which I'm going to go and create right now. It's probably going to be on this playlist or whatever. So I'm going to go and create another video right now, which is how Muslims can be absolutely certain, and how all people can be absolutely certain that God absolutely does exist. And we're going to take a kind of Muslim philosophical standpoint. So check out the next video for that.